It is Lee here from the Appalicious Teacher, and today we are talking about building classroom community and problem-solving skills using classroom discussion cards. Okay, so I don't know about you. Well, actually, I do know because I have seen it for the past probably 10 years. Students are coming in really struggling with their interpersonal skills. I have a lot of theories as to why that's happening. Too much screen time, not enough natural or organic play time outside with friends, I'm going to call it over-parenting, where parents are really truly trying to be helpful in teaching lessons, but instead they're overtaking social situations where students, instead of learning how to solve the problem, just have their parents solve it for them. And over-parenting is creating a problem with students who don't know how to solve their own problems. So today I'm going to share one of my favorite ways to build a strong classroom community, build classroom conversation techniques, as well as collaborative conversation techniques, and kind of reinforcing your classroom. Over-parenting is creating a problem with students who don't know how to solve their own problems. So I started teaching in 2007, and in 2007 I found that most students were able to use and apply our classroom norms to social situations. It wasn't until a few years later that I noticed a lot of my students started to struggle with understanding classroom norms and using classroom norms. By norms, I mean their rules, expectations, and procedures outside of that explicit discussion. So it was like we understood it in the moment, but we had a hard time applying it to general events that were happening in the classroom. They really were struggling to solve some of their own interpersonal problems while also keeping in mind our classroom rules, like being kind or not speaking when others are speaking. So I designed some classroom discussion cards to help students model and practice some of those interpersonal skills that they were lacking so much. And this is something that I use at the beginning of the school year, almost every single year that I have taught, because it really does allow students to very naturally have a classroom discussion, learn classroom discussion norms, build understanding and applying of problem-solving skills across different social events, and also gives the opportunity for students to learn empathy and understanding other person or other people's points of view. That was also a big one that a lot of students struggled with. They felt like they were right, and because they were right, no one else could be right. And, as adults, we know that kind of black and white thinking can be, I don't want to say dangerous, but can be problematic in that, in a work field, a lot of times, a lot of answers could be right, and we need to be accepting of that there might be more than one right answer. So my classroom discussion cards do exactly that in a very safe environment, in that we're in a classroom and this is just a discussion. This is not a real-time event. This is our chance to discuss. So let's get into how I use these. So the first way I use these is always in the first week of school. We sit in a circle on my front carpet, and every student gets a card, kind of like a morning meeting, but our morning meeting, and this is done after we have talked about classroom rules, classroom procedures. And this morning meeting's focus is understanding how to solve problems that could happen in the classroom. So taking turns, usually going in order. There are 44 cards in this pack, so you definitely will have enough for all your students. Taking turns, usually going in order, we'll have students read the card. So one of them, for example, is number 2. It's time to clean up from recess, but I still want to play. What should I do? The obvious answer here should be we should clean up. But what I love is the discussion of what could that look like? What does cleaning up look like? When is it okay to ask for additional time? Maybe you're in the middle of a game. Should you ask for additional time if recess time is over? And what's nice is there's not necessarily a wrong answer, but there's a lot of different things that could come up in the conversation that you as the teacher are guiding and allowing students to apply the rules, like follow directions quickly. What does that look like? But what if I'm engaged in this game and I don't want it to stop? How do I still follow directions quickly? So I love the discussion cards. So the first way we use it, always in the beginning of the year, is we start in that circle, that morning meeting, and we usually go through. Now, sometimes we don't always have time to do all 18 students. Sometimes we kind of skip around in the numbers, but the goal is to probably get through at least 9 of them if we can. Then the next day, we usually pick up and try to finish the last 9, making sure that students have their same card. I usually pass them out by number. So like number 1 gets number 1, number 2 gets number 2, and so forth. So it's a little easier to keep track. That's just a little teacher tip there. So that's one way that I use those cards. So the cards are a great way to build classroom community because students are really starting to see and understand how they can treat each other and how that might affect how they treat each other. Usually in the first week after we are done discussing some of the cards, I have students fill out a reflection sheet like this where they go in and put their card number that they're answering, what they would do, and then give a justification why. So for example, one of them is, I see someone steal something out of someone else's desk. What would I do? If they say, I would tell that person to put the item back, why would they do that? Why would they tell that person? Is because they don't want that other person to get in trouble. They know what it feels like to steal something, or whatever their justification is. I love having that justification on the card, and then we can use that part as a launching point. So after we've done a few of the cards, we have them work on that reflection. Another way is my school does something called a circle time. Where basically once a week we sit and do a classroom discussion on an event. We were doing it on Wednesdays, and during our circle time is when we could talk about different things students were excited about, sharing information about themselves, or classroom problems. And so a lot of times during circle time, after we had already gone through the cards and had talked about different things that could happen, during circle time, I might grab a card and bring up that topic and kind of talk about how it might look in our classroom. So for example, I feel like number 6 is one that we see a lot and students don't always know what to do, which is, on the playground, I notice a student bullying another. What should I do? And this, of course, talks about how what students can do to help solve bullying, because I think a lot of students think their initial reaction is to tell an adult, which is a great solution and definitely should be encouraged, but there's other ways to solve that same problem. The best way to combat a bully is to call the bully out, and so you can talk about the strategies of what that might look like, things like that. So first, we would use it as a whole group discussion, and then, kind of build from there and allow students to add their answers as to what they might do. We could even model or move to like partners where students are discussing what they might do on that one situation. So that's the second way that I would use that. The third way I would use it, and I would often do this in the still in the back to school time, is I would do like a stand up, hand up, pair up, which is basically a mixer activity where every student gets a card, they stand up with their hand up, they walk around the room. When you say stop, they slap each other's hands, like give them to other high fives, and then read their cards and discuss their answers or their choices as to what they would do given the scenario. And I love that because it gives students a big opportunity to hear other people's perspectives, but it also limits the conversation to just 2 students instead of having to hear a million, right? Because after a while, once we keep hearing information, we shut off. So it's nice just for them to hear the 2, and then they switch the card and they can move to someone else. And talk about in the new scenario what they would do. I love that partner activity, especially for older students who can read and discuss on their own, especially we're talking 2nd grade, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. That's a great one.
So one of my favorite parts of this classroom discussion product is that in addition to the printable cards that you can, use and print out, there also includes a PowerPoint or a Google Slides presentation that you can use. So this includes a direction slide, so that you can review the classroom discussion rules before you get into the discussion, as well as all of the discussion cards in digital form. This can be done in PowerPoint, or you can upload it to your Google Classroom and have it in slides. Um, there's also a section where you can add your own card number. So if there was a specific scenario you want to talk to students about, maybe some based on something that's happened in your classroom, this is the perfect spot. You can add those in. And I love that you can select a card, hit your slideshow button, and you could, show the whole slide, talk about it as a class, or have every student read it quietly to themselves, then they can discuss it in their group. There's just a lot. This allows a lot of flexibility where every student is reading and being able to process exactly what is being asked. So this is one of my favorite features of this classroom discussion pack.
So then they can fill out their reflection sheet and share their answers in their small group at their table, or we can do a triangle group where they share their answers. The goal, though, is that they are sharing their answers. That's what's going to build that classroom community where we're accepting of other people's points of views, but we're also reinforcing the classroom procedures or classroom expectations that we have set, as well as building kind of these multi-application areas, as well as building these sort of like applying the procedure area, which is where I see most students struggle. Like, they can tell me the rule is to follow the directions quickly, but they have a hard time applying it to everyday things that are happening in the classroom, like when the teacher says it's time to clean up, but I don't want to stop the game I'm playing. So this is a great way to discuss how to apply those problem solving skills to everyday classroom problems. So if you like this activity and want to add it to your first week of back to school lesson plans, you can look down in my video notes here and grab the link. It is one of my favorite products that I use every year at back to school time. And then again, I bring it back out usually in the January time, and then into towards the end of the year when we're starting to get a little, and we need some reminders of how to discuss and talk. So thanks for joining me today as we talked about these classroom discussion cards. Like I said, you can grab them in the link in the description.